Hello and welcome to Janome Stitch Club UK. My name is Julia. I'm one of the educators here at Janome, and every month we try to show you little tricks and tips and a few little projects maybe for you to get to know your sewing machines and maybe use different techniques, different stitches that you haven't used before. Now, as you can see, I'm in full sailor mode today, so we are off to the beach. We're going to the seaside, and I thought what we'd do is have a look at these are the sort of projects that are fantastic for having a look at your stitches. And very often when you see these sorts of projects, they are actually done free motion, but all of these have been done just using the stitches on the machine, no free motion involved. It's almost like a challenge, a bit of stitch bingo. I've mentioned this before, I will explain it again in a minute, and it's a way of getting you to actually look at what's on your machine, look at the stitches and think a bit outside the box about what those stitches are there for. So I'm going to turn you round. You can see there's an absolute mess because I've been doing these. It started quite tidy and now it's really messy. I love doing this sort of stuff though, really good scrap buster, and if you need to get your Sojo back in the room, this might be just the thing for you. We're going to have a little bit of fun today. We've done postcards before, hang on, there we go. We've done these little tree ones a while back, so if you wanted to have a look at that video as well, you might want to. They're one of my favourite things for doing. They're a really good one for if you've just finished a big project, or if you're not quite sure what you want to do, or if you've lost your Sojo a little bit, and also in the summer when maybe you're out and about so you don't have quite as long in your sewing room. They're also a really good way of getting to know your machine and the stitches, etc., that it can do without having to do massive projects every time. So I've shown you this before. This is my little stitch bingo box. All the stitches on my atelier are in here, and I picked out a few just to see what I can play with. I bend the rules in this game, I have to tell you. The rule's supposed to be that I can use the regular straight stitch, the triple stitch, the satin stitch, but then I pick out, say, 3 or 4 stitches and then to make a little picture with them. Well, like I say, I do tend to bend the rules, but you know, no one's judging, no one's judging. So I start with, these are 7x5. Thin felt, and I've also put a little bit of stitch and tear on the back. Just, you can use anything you like, but I always find that something a little bit firmer, especially because I am making them as postcards, it gives them quite a nice sort of bit of body. And then because we're doing seaside this week and beaches, I've just gone through my scraps and fished out. This looks terribly neat, trust me. My scrap pile, well, I say my scrap pile that's a euphemism for basically the rest of my room that you can't see because it's out of shot, does not look this tidy. But I've gone through and picked out some sand colour stuff, some sky and some sea. I'm keeping it really basic. I've also prepped, and I'm not always this organised, but obviously I have to be for this. I've cut out some little umbrella shapes. I think you can see I've used them on here, and these I've just got off the internet. If you go into colouring pages or something like that, kids colouring pages are usually really good for this sort of thing. I've also cut out a few beach huts, and then I've looked through my fabrics and found various things. So I've got this scrap here. I've bond webbed the back because look, there's some really cute little yachts and boats on here. I've also got some scraps that had seagulls on as well, and I've cut out a stripy beach towel. I think you can see what's going on there. I've checked as well, where's it gone, so buttons, anything that's sort of, you know, relatively sea themed. I've got going on in there, and the random stuff. Now let me put these in here because otherwise I know what's going to happen. They're going to go walkabout. So wool, this is wool scraps. You know, sometimes you go in the charity shop and you get things like this. You might have felting wool as well, wool tops, anything like this. This is great. Look at the colours in there, brilliant for this kind of little project. And net, because we're by the sea, so I think this came off a badminton set for the kids. This is organic onions, tangerines, not got much of that left. And then you've got things like organza, and I had loads of this and I can't find the rest of it. Tulle, things like that, even lace, anything that's, you know, giving you vibes of a bit of sea froth and that kind of thing. So we've got a fair range of stuff to start with before we even go on to the stitches that we're going to look at. And as I say, I've picked out a few here. I've got things like noodly stitches, and when I say noodly, I mean this kind of thing. Satin stitches are always good as well, and then we might want things for rocks or boulders, wavy stitches. I've got a lovely little Greek key one. I couldn't find it, the one that a lot of machines have got. I'll show you it when we're on the machine, but I couldn't find my actual Stitch Bingo card. It's in there somewhere. That literally looks like a wave. So loads of stitches on there. So have a little look through at the stitches that you've got and see which ones you want to have a play with. As I say, anything that's got these kinds of shapes on, all I have done with this is bonder web the back, because then, like I say, I can go in and cut them. The bonder web means that they'll stick down and won't move around. You can just use a glue stick as well, but sometimes that gums up your needle a little bit, so I'm a big fan of bonder web. It's nice and clean and easy to use. So I could have a whole little set of these yachts basically out to play in the ocean. I'm not cutting the flag at the top. I'm trying to keep the simplest shape that I can. So we've got a few of those. So I might just do this one, this demo one, as a bit of a mix and match of all of the things that are in here. And then you can have a little play of your own, because I would absolutely love to see what you come up with. So I'm going to start, and first things first, with any scene, we need to start building it up from the back to the front. So I'm going to start with the sky. Nice motley fabric. Now that's the right side, and as I do with a lot with this technique, I'm actually going to use the wrong side because it's slightly lighter and I think it's better. We've done it previously when I did the beach scene with the paints and the crayons. So if you don't have scraps, you can paint your scene if you want to with fabric paints or even just wax crayons. Both of the previous videos I'll put in the link in the comments below. I'll give you the link so that you can maybe have a little look at those. So we're going to start with the sky, and I need a stitch that's going to give me clouds. And I've used two on here. So I've used the scallop stitch, and I've also used the scallop satin stitch as well. So let's go to the machine and show you how to do that. First up, I'm going to go into my satin stitches. Now this little scallop one is actually quite a common stitch. You'll find this on lots and lots of models. If you've only got one or two satin stitches, chances are one of them is going to be this one. And we've looked at it previously in its proper form for actually edging fabrics. But now let's see what else we can do when we play with it. Now I'm going to make an actual pattern out of it. So because I'm on the atelier, I need to go up here so that I can just do one stitch at a time. Because what I want to do is I want to do 3 in a row, but I now want to go back along and alter each one. So if you don't have this type of screen, you're going to be using your memory button in between. So you're going to set the size that you want for that first one, and then press memory, and then go into the second one, set all the sizes, etc. for that, press memory, so that you can make that nice pattern. So the first one is quite wide. I'm on the 9, so I'm going to take that down just a little bit because it is quite a small project I'm working on. Now, I also have the option in these satin stitches on this model of doing elongation, which is here. So again, you might, if it's a different model, you might have the E button somewhere on your machine. If in doubt, stick something in the comments and I'll get back to you. So I'm going to make that one longer. Now I'll go along to the next one. Same thing, I'm going to bring it down in height a little bit, but I'm not going, should I make it longer? I might make it longer. If I want to look at it, I just press here. And look, it'll show me how it's looking. So I think that is too low. So I'm going to bring that up a bit. And then that last one, I am going to bring down. Oh, no, not like that. Too much. I'm just going to bring the height down on that and close it up a wee bit. So I'm going to bring that down to about 7. So again, if I press on there, and then I can have a look just to see if I'm happy with that pattern. And the last thing I'm going to add along here is I'm going to put a lock stitch on, just so as I know I'm going to finish. So I've got my open toe foot on, so I can see what's going on, and I've just got a white thread in here, and we are ready to go. And I've just been winding lots of bobbins, and I always take my foot pedal out when I wind bobbins, but when I'm doing stuff like this, I do, like I say, I have lots of just white or light grey. I wind lots of bobbins beforehand because I'm going to change all the colours on the top for doing this sort of thing, but I always leave the same colour in the bobbin. Don't want to be messing around with that. So let's get going. And I haven't stuck this down, I'm just holding it down. And then when it does the third one, because I've added that lock stitch into my pattern, there we go, it's gonna finish ready for me to cut. So I don't need to do loads. I'm only, for something this size, probably only going to do 2. They also make quite good birthday cards, I think. It's nice to do a few and then have them in stock, isn't it? So if it's someone's birthday or a thank you or something, it's always nice. Give something a bit personal. So there we go, we've got a bit of sky cloud going on. So I could go in again if I had a bigger scene, and I could change it up again to do slightly different. Rather nice. So next up we want C. So I can just cut my piece here. I normally trim it all up at the end anyway, but this is lovely. It's like a batik, so I've already got that colour in. If you don't have a fabric with that colour, remember you can use those crayons to just add, or paints to add a little bit more drama into your colour if you want. We're also, of course, because why wouldn't we, I've got a selection of various threads that are, of course, variegated. Here we go, nice range of different colours. I find that if you get different makes as well, you get different colours, and that's what I'm always looking for this sort of thing, so that I can have lots of different colours in. Now I'm going to lighten it up, so I might go with this one. So I'm going to go into my decorative stitches. You might also find them under the, basically we just want anything curvy. Now I need to go back to a whole line of it rather than just one stitch at a time. But even if you haven't got hundreds of stitches, you will have something. And actually, if you're on a very basic machine, even something like this, which is the elasticated zigzag, so it's like a dot 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 one, and I would do that several times in different heights and widths and things over the top, and you'll get quite a nice effect. You might also have, there's a slightly curvier version of that as well on quite a lot of machines. Anyway, let me find you though, because there's a couple on here. So I've got this one here. It looks like the Japanese wave, doesn't it? Really rather nice. Again, I think that's a little bit too high, and also to get the perspective, what's worth doing is starting with it quite small at the back of your picture and maybe close up, and then as it comes forward, enlarging it so that you get a little bit more of a idea of perspective. So I've taken it down to 5. I've also taken my stitch length below 2. I'm on 1.8, and then I can start stitching. Because we've been playing around recently with twin needles, I think I mentioned in the twin needle video, the pin tuck one, that I was doing a beach scene for another project, and this was one of my little experiments, and I thought it looked great because it does have that sort of effect, doesn't it, that you very often get of the rippling in the sand along the beach. So I'm going to put that in next, but I'm just going to, because I've already done the work on it, I'm not going to talk you through the stitches again. I'll put that as a link, and I'm just going to use a straight stitch to do a flip and stitch with this one. So I'll just use the colour I've got in as well. I'm going to wiggle it a little bit and see, only a tiny bit, because this is actually on the bias. So now, still using that straight stitch, I'm just going to add a few extra curves in between just to stitch it down, really. But it does have quite a nice effect, doesn't it? Especially with that variegated thread. If you are using variegated thread for your twin needles, then wind some onto a bobbin, because you know you won't have two of the same colour, but just wind some onto the bobbin and use that as your second spool. So there we go, a few more just wiggly lines to hold that down. So that's all coming together quite nicely, I think. So the next thing, I'm going to put some of those little boats out to sea. I think it might be nice to have a little flotilla going on. So I'm going to bear in mind the sizes. There we go. So I'm going to just iron those on. When you are ironing stuff, if you're using all manner of threads and bits and pieces with applique, put a piece of greaseproof paper over the top, just in case, because some of the more unusual threads, and some of the particularly things like I'm using tulle and netting and stuff like that, you will find that it might melt depending on what temperature your iron is at. So better safe than sorry. Just put a little piece of greaseproof paper, baking paper, over the top before you iron it. Popped out my thread for white thread to stitch down the boats, which I've ironed down. And the stitch that I'm going to use is, you could use a tiny zigzag, you could use a blanket stitch, you could just use a little tiny straight stitch. But the one that I like when I'm doing really, really small stuff like this is actually the lightning stitch, which is one of the stretch stitches, picture coming into the side here. But it's a tiny, kind of slightly off kilter zigzag, and it's really weeny. And I always think that gives quite a nice effect. So I'm just going to go around my little boats. And like I say, it is tiny. Let's put my pivot on. But I find sometimes it, I don't know, just looks better, less straight. And if you're not sure you've covered it or got it down, or like here for example, I've got a white line going through the center, so I can stitch across there as well. And I think what I may well do, I'm going to go back again, and I'm going to go up that centre between the two sails. There we go, and back down again. And then, there we go. So he's nicely put on, but like I say, I like that little stitch. I think it's a good one. And this is what I mean about using stitches, not necessarily what you think they're for. Sometimes you just need to try it out, see what it is you're trying to achieve. Things like this, even though it's got bonder web on, you see, it will fray out. So sometimes I don't want that fraying. I want to make sure it's stuck down. And it's not as intense as a satin stitch, so I can go around it again. I'm going to go across the bottom there. On stitches like this, where I term them as a kind of continuous stitch, the lock off doesn't work in the same way, because the lock off, you know, it needs to finish a whole stitch, and obviously they're continuing stitches. So if you press and hold the reverse button, it will stop exactly where you want. So that's the way to be really neat and tidy with that one. So there we go, 3 ships have come a-sailing. So what else? Oh, I know. Let's have a look at some of this stuff to put down the bottom here. It's almost like seaweed, isn't it? So I'm just going to cut a few pieces of that off so that I can kind of have it coming into this corner here. Now, because this is quite fluffy, I need something that's going to hold that down, and that is when the stitches, and as I said before, I often call these noodly stitches. So this sort of thing, where it's like loopy, here we go, or that one as well, because this, it needs to, I don't want to flatten it completely, but I just want to make sure it's completely held down. So these are the kind of stitches that are really, really good. They're not quite as neat and tidy, so they look quite good for this. So as I say, if you've got pieces of little wool roving or something like that as well, it's quite good for holding that down, and it will give a similar effect to sort of the beginnings of felting process. So I'm going to change up and put in some green for that. So here we are. This is one of my noodly stitches. The 9mm is going to be way too fat for this tiny little thing I'm doing. So I can just take that down. I can take the stitch length down, but I can't take it up. So I might take it down, close it up a wee bit. And I've got variegated thread in there, so that shouldn't show. So I'm just going to do exactly the same with this little bit under here. As you notice, I put a little beach hut on here because I felt it needed something in the corner. And I've just used triple stitch on that beach hut and then a little satin stitch across the top there for the roof. So now I'm going to add in some of these little pebble stitches down the bottom here, and it kind of goes round twice, so they look quite good. And when it's on the second one, I'm going to press my lock off, so that will finish that off. There we go. So I've just got a few little pebbles along the front there, and if you wanted to either colour them in, because this is a postcard, you can use anything to colour those in. So just go with pencils or basic felt tips actually, just so they've got a bit of colour on these stones. These fine liners are quite good for this sort of thing, because what's not to like? It involves glue, chopping things up, sticking things down, sewing, beaches. There we go. So I think that this one pretty much done now. So I just wanted to talk you through. So what we now do is, obviously I've gone over the edges here, so I can bring my scissors and trim this up. And once we've trimmed it up, I can go in and use that over edge stitch again, except instead of for fringing, I'm going to use it for its actual purpose and run all the way around. So I've got my M foot on here, and this gives a nice edge to the postcard. So there we go, a few final little trims, and I think that's just about ready. Another postcard for the collection. There we go, just a few ideas to get you started, and I did mention that I would show you a slightly bigger project with clouds on. This is, I can't really, it's too big, I can't really show you all of it. This is a quilt project underway, but this is the summer panel, and what I really wanted to show you was that what I did with the clouds on that little postcard. And can you see the effect I've then hand quilted in right underneath those clouds, so that, because obviously this is batting, I've used felt on these, so there's a lot more loft in that, and that has really made them pucker up. So although we've used these stitches to make these little postcards, I just wanted you to see that they can be used in a bigger on a bigger project, a much bigger project, and everything on this project has been looking at stitches and using the stitches on the machines and all kinds of different techniques for applique. and that's what those stitches are there for just sort of dressing up and making your work much more interesting. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you will have a go, and if you do tag us in it on Instagram at Janome UK, and we'll try and find those, because it's really lovely to see what you're doing. If you've got any questions at all, please just pop them in the comments below. I know I didn't get through everything on all of those postcards, but I will return to things, don't worry, and I will put all the links to all the other videos in the comments as well below in the description, so you can find that. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, just subscribe and maybe give us a little thumbs up, and if you press the bell you will be notified whenever we drop videos on this channel. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon.